The champagne was chilled. The mansion buzzed with anticipation, but Seraphina's heart held a tremor of unease. Damian, her billionaire husband, was missing their baby's gender reveal, whisked away on an urgent business trip to Art Basel, Hong Kong. Halfway across the world, as blue or pink confetti was meant to rain down, another life-altering event was unfolding. Damian wasn't just missing a party. He was at another hospital with another woman as another baby fought its way into the world. 2 mothers, 2 newborns, 1 devastating secret. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a collision of worlds that will shatter a dynasty. The late afternoon sun, a painterly wash of gold and rose, streamed through the panoramic windows of the Thorn estate, illuminating the opulence within. Villa de Lys, as it was known, perched atop the highest hill overlooking the glittering expanse of the city, a testament to Damian Thorne's Midas touch in the world of international finance and tech. Today, however, its grandeur was softened, adorned with whimsical streams of pastel silks and an explosion of white roses, all in preparation for an event far more personal than any corporate takeover, the gender reveal of Damian and Seraphina Thorne's first child. Seraphina Ainsworth Thorne, a vision in a flowing ivory gown that did little to conceal the gentle swell of her 7-month pregnancy, glided through the manicured gardens. Her fingers adorned with a wedding band that rivaled the national debt of a small country, lightly brushed over a towering arrangement of hydrangeas. Every detail was perfect, a reflection of her meticulous nature and the unbridled joy that had consumed her since she'd learned of her pregnancy. This baby was the culmination of all her dreams, the anchoring of her love for Damian, a love she believed was as unshakable as the ancient oaks dotting their estate. She paused, a slight frown creasing her usually serene brow. Damian. He should have been here hours ago, his laughter booming across the lawns, his arm possessively around her waist. Instead, a curt text message had arrived that morning. Darling crisis at the Hong Kong subsidiary. Have to fly out. Art Basel. Hong Kong Investors Summit is also happening. Can't miss it. Back before you know it. Devastated to miss today. Will call. All my love. D. Art Basel, Hong Kong. It was a legitimate high-profile event, the kind Damian often frequented, schmoozing with the global elite, sniffing out the next big venture. But the timing felt like a cruel twist of fate. Their baby. Their moment. Overshadowed by... what? A teetering deal, a new acquisition. Seraphina had tried to push down the knot of disappointment, the faint, unwelcome whisper of suspicion. Damian was a man of immense responsibility. His empire didn't run itself. This was part of the package, the gilded cage that came with being Mrs. Thorne. Everything looks breathtaking. Seraphina. Chloe Dubois. Seraphina's best friend and a successful art gallery owner herself said, linking her arm through Seraphina's. Chloe's sharp eyes, however, missed nothing. You, on the other hand, look like you're about to interrogate the caterer over the canapes. Seraphina forced a smile. Just... Damian. His trip. It was so sudden. Chloe squeezed her arm. I know, sweetie. It's rotten luck. But he'll be on the first plane back, showering you both with apologies and probably a Fabergé egg to make up for it. It's not about the gifts, Seraphina murmured, her gaze drifting towards the sprawling infinity pool, where guests were beginning to mingle their chatter, a symphony of polite society. It's his presence, He'll call Chloe, assured her. Probably stuck in some dreadful board meeting fighting off dragons for you and the little one. Seraphina nodded, wanting to believe it, needing to. She had spent months planning this day, envisioning Damian's face when the confetti, blue or pink, rained down upon them. She imagined his strong hands on her belly, his voice thick with emotion. Now that perfect picture had a gaping hole, a silhouette where her husband should be. Unbeknownst to Seraphina, Damian Thorne was indeed fighting but not dragons, and certainly not in Hong Kong. He was pacing the sterile corridor of Evergreen Memorial Hospital, a facility far removed from the usual five-star clinics his family frequented. His bespoke Italian suit was rumpled, his usually immaculate dark hair disheveled. The scent of antiseptic and fear clung to him, a stark contrast to the rose and champagne awaiting him at Villa de Lys. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Seraphina. He ignored it, his heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't talk to her, not now, not when Isabella Rossi. The woman whose existence was a carefully guarded secret was in the delivery room. Her cries echoing faintly through the closed doors. Isabella, a fiery, passionate artist he'd met a year ago at a gallery opening. Ironically, one Chloe had curated. Isabella was everything Seraphina wasn't. Bohemian, impulsive, living in a charmingly chaotic apartment, filled with paint-splattered canvases and half-finished sculptures. She was his escape, his rebellion against the structured perfection of his life. Their affair had been a whirlwind, a dangerous indulgence he'd convinced himself he could control, until Isabella had tearfully announced her pregnancy 3 months ago. Damian had been flawed. He'd been careless, yes, but the implications were catastrophic. He'd offered her money, a new life somewhere far away. Anything to keep his two worlds from colliding. Isabella, fiercely independent and already deeply attached to the life growing inside her, had refused the money for an abortion, but had agreed to discretion, naively believing Damian would eventually figure things out. He had never told her he was married. He'd painted himself as a man trapped in a complex, loveless business arrangement, a fabrication she'd clung to. He'd planned to be in Hong Kong genuinely. He'd even booked the flight, manufactured a crisis. The Art Basel Summit was the perfect cover. He'd intended to use the time to create distance, to formulate a more permanent solution for the Isabella situation. But fate, it seemed, had a more brutal sense of humor. Yesterday, just as he was leaving for the airport, Isabella had called him, her voice tight with panic. Early contractions, violent and fast. He'd rushed to her the carefully constructed alibi for Seraphina, the Hong Kong trip, already in motion. Now here he was, trapped. His phone buzzed again. Seraphina. Guilt sharp and corrosive twisted in his gut. He silenced the phone, his gaze fixed on the delivery room door. Julian Vance Damian's long-suffering head of security and reluctant confidant materialized beside him, his expression grim. Any news? Sir Damian ran a hand through his hair. Nothing yet. How is everything at the estate? Julian's silence was answer enough. The gender reveal is scheduled for 6 p.m., sir. Mrs. Thorne is expecting your call. Damn it, Damian hissed, slamming his fist softly against the wall. Connectivity issues. Tell them there are terrible connectivity issues at the conference center in Hong Kong. Blame a typhoon, a solar flare, whatever it takes. I've already laid that groundwork. Sir Julian said, his voice devoid of judgment, but heavy with unspoken disapproval. He'd been with the Thorne family for 2 decades, had seen Damian grow from a reckless teenager into a ruthless businessman. He'd cleaned up messes before, but this This was a different echelon of disaster. A doctor in scrubs emerged looking tired but professional. "Mr. Rossi?" he asked, glancing at a chart. Damian had given Isabella's surname to avoid any immediate connection to himself. Damian stepped forward, his throat dry. "Yes. How is she? How's the baby?" The doctor offered a small, weary smile. "Ms. Rossi is stable. She had a difficult labor, but she's a strong woman. And you have a son, Mr. Rossi. Congratulations." A son. The words hit Damian with the force of a physical blow. A son. He had a daughter, or perhaps another son, whose gender was about to be revealed miles away in a world of luxury and blissful ignorance. And now a son born in secrecy and scandal. His meticulously ordered world, already teetering, began to crumble. The confetti cannons were primed at Villa de Lis, and here in the stark reality of Evergreen Memorial, a different kind of explosion had just occurred. The shockwaves were only just beginning to spread. The gardens of Villa de Lis were a sea of expectant faces, a carefully curated guest list of high society's finest. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter pealed, and the air thrummed with a festive energy that only partially masked the undercurrent of curiosity about the absent host. Seraphina stood on a specially constructed dais, a radiant smile plastered on her face. Chloe, a steadfast presence by her side. The giant white balloon, filled with either pink or blue confetti, bobbed gently above them, a symbol of the joy and the unknown that lay ahead. He tried calling again. "Sweetie," Chloe whispered, holding up Seraphina's phone, which had indeed briefly rung. Went straight to voicemail. Julian texted, said the storm in Hong Kong is wreaking havoc with the communications tower near Damian's hotel. Typical tech billionaire luck, eh? Surrounded by gadgets but can't get a signal when it matters. Seraphina's smile wavered for a fraction of a second. A storm. It was plausible. Damian's pre-recorded video message played earlier had been full of apologies and declarations of love, filmed in what looked like a generic, albeit luxurious, hotel suite, a vague skyline visible through the window. He'd looked tired, stressed. She'd clung to his words, his regretful tone. "All right, everyone?" The event planner chirped into a microphone, her voice bright and bubbly. "Are we ready to find out if baby Thorn is a he or a she?" A chorus of enthusiastic yeses rose from the crowd. Seraphina took a deep breath, her hand instinctively going to her belly. This was it. For a moment she closed her eyes, picturing Damian's face, wishing with an intensity that ached that he was there to share this with her. Chloe handed her a long, ornate pin. "Ready?" Seraphina nodded, opened her eyes, and with a surge of adrenaline, plunged the pin into the balloon. A deafening pop followed by a cascade of delicate, shimmering pink. Pink confetti rained down, blanketing the dais, dusting Seraphina's hair and gown like a magical snowfall. Gasps of delight, then cheers erupted from the guests. It was a girl, a daughter. Seraphina felt tears well in her eyes, a mixture of overwhelming joy and a profound, sharp pang of Damian's absence. She laughed, tears streaming down her face as Chloe hugged her tightly. A little princess. Chloe cried, her own eyes sparkling. "Oh, Seraphina, she's going to be adored." Her parents, Catherine and George Ainsworth, rushed forward, enveloping her in emotional embraces. Friends offered congratulations, their faces beaming. In that moment, surrounded by love and celebration, Seraphina allowed herself to be swept away by the sheer happiness of it. Her daughter. Their daughter. Miles away in the quiet, sterile room at Evergreen Memorial Hospital, Damian Thorne stared through the nursery glass at a tiny red-faced infant swaddled in a standard-issue blue hospital blanket. A son, his son. The child looked impossibly fragile, yet his tiny fists were clenched, a miniature warrior already. The doctor had informed him that Isabella was resting exhausted, but stable. The baby, though premature by a few weeks, was surprisingly robust. Damian felt a strange, disorienting pull towards the infant, a primal connection that terrified and bewildered him. This wasn't part of the plan. Nothing about this was part of any plan he'd ever conceived. His phone, which he'd reluctantly switched back on, buzzed again. A text from Chloe. "It's a girl. Seraphina is over the moon. We're all celebrating you and your little princess. Call when you can. The storm sounds awful. XOXO." A girl. Damian leaned against the cool glass, the words blurring in front of his eyes. A daughter. He had a daughter celebrated amidst luxury and joy, and a son born into a secret, his arrival marked by fear and deception. The sheer magnitude of his duplicity crashed down on him. He felt like he was drowning, caught in a rip current of his own making. Mr. Rossi. A nurse with kind eyes approached him. "You can see Ms. Rossi for a few minutes if you'd like. She's asking for you." Damian nodded numbly, following her back to Isabella's private room. It was small, basic, a world away from the VIP suites he was accustomed to. Isabella lay pale and drained against the pillows, but her eyes, dark and intense, lit up when she saw him. "Damian," she whispered, her voice weak. "Did you see him? Our son?" He forced a smile, taking her hand. It felt clammy, fragile. "Yes. He's perfect, Isabella. You were so brave." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was so scared. I thought it was too soon." Her gaze searched his. "You look terrible. This business trip you were supposed to be on. It must have been important for you to rush back like this." Damian's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to fray at the edges, even for Isabella. He'd told her he'd postponed his departure when she'd gone into early labor. Nothing he said, stroking her hair, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth, is more important than you and our boy. He couldn't bring himself to use the term son again so soon. Isabella smiled, a tired, trusting smile that twisted the knife of guilt deeper into his soul. "What are we going to name him?" "We never really decided." He hadn't thought that far ahead. He hadn't allowed himself to imagine a future with this child, with Isabella. His mind was a chaotic mess of pink confetti and blue blankets of Seraphina's radiant joy and Isabella's exhausted trust. "We'll think of something wonderful," he said, vaguely, his mind racing. He needed to get out of there. He needed to call Seraphina to perform the role of the doting husband, stranded by a typhoon, ecstatic about his baby girl. He needed to reinforce the Hong Kong alibi before Julian's carefully laid groundwork started to unravel. I should make some calls," he said, gently extracting his hand. "Let the family know." Another lie, another layer of deceit. Isabella nodded, her eyes already drifting closed. "Don't be long. I want you here." "I won't be," he promised, backing out of the room, the weight of that promise pressing down on him. Outside, he leaned against the wall, gasping for air, as if he'd surfaced from a deep dive. Julian was there, a silent, stoic sentinel. "So Mrs. Thorne has been trying to reach you. She's ecstatic. It's a girl. I know, Julian, I know." Damian snapped his composure, cracking. "Get me out of here. I need to make a call and find out the earliest possible flight to Hong Kong. I actually have to go to Hong Kong now. I need to be seen there." His mind was already scrambling, trying to retroactively piece together his alibi to make the impossible somehow plausible. "That might be complicated," Sir Julian said, his tone carefully neutral. "The hospital requires the father's details for the birth certificate, and Ms. Rosie is understandably expecting you to be involved." Damian stared at him, the full implication of his situation beginning to dawn. He wasn't just a visitor here. He was in the eyes of this hospital, and Isabella, the father. Mr. Rosie, a fictional identity that was rapidly becoming all too real. "Handle it, Julian," Damian said, his voice dangerously low. "Just handle it. Money, whatever it takes. No link back to me. Not officially." Julian nodded, but his eyes conveyed the near impossibility of the task. "And the name for the child, sir?" "They'll need one for the records." Damian thought of the pink confetti of Seraphina's joyous tears. A girl, his legitimate daughter, and here a secret son, a storm of emotions, guilt, a strange, unwelcome flicker of possessiveness for this new child, and an overwhelming desire to flee, churned within him. He needed a name that meant nothing, that would create no ripple, no connection. Leo. He said the first name that came to mind. Simple. Anonymous. Leo Rossi. As Julian went to deal with the hospital administration, Damian finally dialed Seraphina's number. He composed his features into an expression of weary joy, pitching his voice to convey a man battling bad reception and overwhelming emotion. "Seraphina. My love. Can you hear me?" The connection is atrocious. He began the performance of his life underway. On one side of the city, a mansion celebrated new life with unblemished joy. On the other, a mother cradled her newborn, unaware that her happiness was built on a foundation of lies, while the father of her child desperately tried to keep his two worlds from imploding. The confetti had settled, but the true storm was just beginning to gather. The days following the gender reveal blurred into a frantic juggling act for Damian Thorne. He'd managed a brief, heavily stage-managed video call with Seraphina from a hastily booked suite at the Grand Hyatt in Hong Kong, the city's glittering skyline, a convincing backdrop. He'd feigned elation over their daughter expressing deep regret over the typhoon and the interminable investor meetings that kept him away. Seraphina, still basking in the glow of impending motherhood and surrounded by a supportive network, had bought his performance, her earlier suspicions momentarily lulled by his apparent sincerity and the sheer impossibility of imagining anything else. "I've already started on the nursery, darling," she'd chirped, her face radiant on his laptop screen, all shades of blush and rose gold. "And I've picked out a name. Lily. Lily Grace Thorne. Do you like it, Lily?" It was beautiful, delicate, fitting for the princess he'd always envisioned. "I love it, Seraphina. It's perfect," he'd said, the image of a tiny, blue-blanketed Leo Rossi flashing guiltily in his mind. He'd made his excuses, blaming another urgent meeting, and ended the call, the weight of his deceit pressing heavily on his chest. His actual time in Hong Kong was a whirlwind of damage control. He made a point of being seen at the Art Basel events, shaking hands, taking photos, cementing his alibi. Julian, ever efficient, had managed to delay the official birth registration for Leo, citing bureaucratic hurdles and Isabella's need for recovery buying Damian precious time. He'd wired a substantial sum to a private account for Isabella, ostensibly for baby expenses, and the best medical care, a transaction masked through several shell corporations. But back at Evergreen Memorial, Isabella was growing restless. Her recovery was swift, and her maternal instincts were strong. She wanted Damian by her side, not just his money or fleeting visits. She wanted to create a family. "When are you coming back to the city for good?" Damian she'd ask during their brief, tense phone calls. "Leo needs his father. I need you. This long-distance thing, it's not what we planned." Damian would offer vague promises citing business entanglements, the need for discretion. "Soon," Isabella was promise. "Just a few more things to sort out. For us. For our future." He was weaving a complex web of lies, each one spawning a dozen more, and the threads were beginning to tangle. Meanwhile, at Villa de Lis, Seraphina, though outwardly serene, found herself increasingly unsettled by small, almost imperceptible inconsistencies. Damian's calls, when they came, were often at odd hours, his explanations for his continued absence becoming increasingly convoluted. The Hong Kong subsidiary crisis seemed to drag on indefinitely. Chloe, with her keen eye for detail and a healthy skepticism born from years in the often duplicitous art world, was the first to voice concrete doubts. "It's strange, isn't it?" Chloe mused one afternoon as she helped Seraphina sort through a mountain of baby gifts. This Hong Kong situation. Damian practically owns the city's financial district. What crisis could possibly keep him away for so long, especially now? He said it's delicate, a hostile takeover attempt. Very hush-hush. Seraphina replied, folding a tiny cashmere cardigan. But even to her own ears it sounded thin. Damian thrived on hostile takeovers. He usually parachuted in, decimated the opposition, and was back within days triumphant. "And Art Basel finished last week," Chloe pressed gently. "I have friends who were there. They said the weather was fine after the first day. No major typhoons grounding flights for that long." A cold knot formed in Seraphina's stomach. He said the airport was a mess, a huge backlog. Chloe pursed her lips. "Maybe. But I also heard a whisper. A very faint one, mind you. That Damian was seen at the Gilded Spoon the night of your gender reveal." The Gilded Spoon was an incredibly exclusive, notoriously discreet restaurant in their own city, miles from any international airport, and certainly not on the way to Hong Kong. Seraphina's blood ran cold. That's impossible. He was already in transit. Julian drove him to the airport himself that morning. She remembered Julian's solemn confirmation. Someone could be mistaken. "Of course," Chloe said quickly, seeing the distress on Seraphina's face. "Gossip is just gossip. But perhaps it's worth looking into just for your peace of mind." Peace of mind was the one thing Seraphina hadn't had since Damian's abrupt departure. His absence felt like a phantom limb, a constant ache. The joy of her pregnancy was now tinged with an unshakable anxiety. That night, Seraphina couldn't sleep. Chloe's words echoed in her mind. The Gilded Spoon. It was Damian's favorite place for clandestine meetings, for deals struck in hushed tones over ludicrously expensive cognac. He'd once joked it was so private you could commit murder there, and no one would notice until a week later. Driven by a desperate need for truth, Seraphina did something she'd never done before she decided to investigate her own husband. Her first call was to the reservations manager at the Gilded Spoon, a woman she'd charmed at several charity galas. "Eleanor, darling." "It's Seraphina Thorne." She began, her voice smoother than she felt. A rather odd question, but was my husband Damian dining there on the evening of the 15th? He seems to have misplaced a rather important document, and we're retracing his steps. The lie felt clumsy, but Eleanor, ever discreet, simply purred. "Let me check for you, Mrs. Thorne." "One moment." The silence stretched, taut and agonizing. Seraphina's heart pounded. "Yes, Mrs. Thorne." Eleanor confirmed. Mr. Thorne had a private booth. He was here for several hours. A late dinner. Seraphina's breath hitched. "Was he alone?" A slight pause. "He was with a guest, I believe. I didn't see them personally, but that's what the booking indicated. Can I help with anything else?" "No, Eleanor." "That's very helpful. Thank you." She hung up her hand, trembling. He hadn't been on a plane. He'd been in their city at the Gilded Spoon, while she was at home, her heart breaking over his absence at their baby's gender reveal. With a guest. The carefully constructed facade of her perfect marriage began to crack, revealing something ugly and unknown beneath. Her next move was more desperate. She remembered Damian mentioning Julian Vance handled all his personal security and all travel arrangements. Julian was loyal almost to a fault, but he also had a soft spot for Seraphina, having known her since she first started dating Damian. She found Julian at the estate's security office, a bunker of monitors and tech that rivaled a small intelligence agency. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I need you to be honest with me. Where was Damian on the night of the 15th? Julian, usually unflappable, visibly stiffened. His gaze flickered towards one of the many security monitors before returning to hers, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Thorne, as you know, Mr. Thorne, was en route to Hong Kong. I personally oversaw his departure arrangements. His arrangements, Julian, or his actual departure?" Seraphina pressed her eyes, unwavering. "Because the Gilded Spoon confirmed he dined there that night." Julian's composure faltered. He ran a hand over his neatly trimmed grey hair. "Mrs. Thorne, Damian's business is complex. Sometimes arrangements change at the last minute for security reasons or due to sensitive negotiations. Negotiations that required him to lie to his pregnant wife about being on another continent while our baby's gender was revealed." Seraphina's voice rose, laced with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Betrayal, anger, a dawning horror. "Who was he with?" "Julian." Julian looked away, his jaw tight. "I am not at liberty to discuss the details of Mr. Thorne's private meetings." "Private meetings?" Seraphina felt a chill, or a private life. The silence that followed was damning. In that moment, Seraphina knew. It wasn't just a business trip. It wasn't just a lie. It was something far more profound, far more devastating. She turned away, a cold dread seeping into her bones. The image of Damian's stressed face on the video call from Hong Kong now seemed like a carefully crafted performance. The typhoon, the connectivity issues, all lies. Her mind raced. If he wasn't in Hong Kong initially, what else was a lie? The urgency. The entire trip. And who was the guest at the Gilded Spoon? and why the elaborate deception. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. The suddenness of the trip, the convenient crisis, the near impossible communication barriers, all coinciding perfectly with their gender reveal. It was too neat, too orchestrated. Later that week, Damian finally returned, feigning jet lag, and showering Seraphina with gifts and apologies. He regaled her with stories of cutthroat negotiations and the vibrant Hong Kong art scene, his performance flawless. But Seraphina watched him with new eyes, every word, every gesture scrutinized. The trust once the bedrock of their marriage had been eroded, replaced by a gnawing suspicion. She hired a private investigator, a discreet firm Chloe recommended specializing in high-net-worth individuals. It felt like a betrayal in itself, a clandestine act that mirrored Damian's own. But she had to know the truth. The investigator was expensive, efficient, and disturbingly quick. Within days, the preliminary report landed in Seraphina's encrypted email inbox. It was brief, but its contents were explosive. Flight manifests confirmed Damian Thorne had not flown to Hong Kong on the 15th. He'd flown out 2 days later on the 17th. There were credit card receipts placing him in their city on the 15th and 16th. And then there was the surveillance photo. Grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Damian looking harried entering Evergreen Memorial Hospital on the evening of the 15th. The same hospital her investigator noted a Ms. Isabella Rossi had been admitted to for childbirth that very day. Evergreen Memorial. Not a top-tier facility. Not where a Thorn would ever seek medical treatment. Unless Isabella Rossi. The name was unfamiliar, yet it sent a shiver down Seraphina's spine. Childbirth. Seraphina stared at the report, the words swimming before her eyes. The dates, the times, Damian's frantic departure, the lies, it all coalesced into a horrifying, undeniable truth. He hadn't just missed their baby's gender reveal for a business meeting. He had missed it because he was at a hospital with another woman. A woman who had just given birth. To his child. The world tilted on its axis. The beautiful nursery, the blush and rose gold, Lily Grace Thorne. It all felt like a cruel mockery. Her perfect life, her cherished love story, was a meticulously crafted lie. And Damian Thorne, the man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was living a double life of unimaginable betrayal. The cracks in the facade had shattered, revealing a chasm of deceit that threatened to swallow her whole. The investigator's report lay open on Seraphina's antique writing desk, its stark black and white text, a brutal counterpoint to the soft, expectant atmosphere of the nearly completed nursery. Each word was a nail hammered into the coffin of her marriage. Damian, Isabella Rossi, Evergreen Memorial Hospital, childbirth, the same day as their gender reveal. For a long moment, Seraphina felt nothing but a chilling numbness. Then came the tremors starting in her hands and spreading through her body, not from fear, but from a burgeoning ice-cold rage. The meticulous plans for Lily's arrival, the dreams she had so carefully woven around Damian, all felt like ash in her mouth. She picked up her phone, her movements precise, deliberate. She didn't call Damian. Not yet. She called Chloe, her voice surprisingly steady. "It's true, Chloe. All of it. And it's worse than we imagined." Chloe was there within 20 minutes, her usual vivacity replaced by a grim determination. She listened silently as Seraphina laid out the investigator's findings, her face paling with each revelation. A baby Chloe breathed horrified. "He has another baby. With this." Isabella Rossi. Born the same day our Lily's gender was announced, Seraphina said, her voice flat. While I was crying happy tears for our daughter, he was welcoming another child. The bitter irony was a physical ache. "The man is a monster," Chloe declared, her eyes blazing. "What are you going to do?" A plan began to form in Seraphina's mind, a plan born of heartbreak and a steely resolve she hadn't known she possessed. She wouldn't crumble. She wouldn't be the weeping, hysterical wife. She would be the architect of her own justice. First, Seraphina said, her gaze turning towards the window, overlooking the vast estate that now felt like a gilded prison. "I need to see her. This Isabella Rossi. I need to understand." Chloe was hesitant. "Sarah is that wise. What if she's difficult? What if she knew about you?" "I need to know," Seraphina insisted. "And then I will confront Damian. But not here. Not in this house, filled with his lies." She thought of the gilded spoon, the scene of his initial betrayal on that fateful night. Poetic justice, perhaps. No, something more public, yet controlled. Their anniversary was in 2 days. He'd booked the private dining room at Oriole, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, known for its breathtaking views, and more importantly to Seraphina, now its thick walls. The investigator had provided Isabella Rossi's address, a modest apartment in a bohemian downtown district. The next afternoon, Seraphina, dressed in understated but undeniably expensive clothes that signaled quiet power, drove herself there. Chloe, despite her reservations, insisted on waiting in the car. Isabella's apartment building was a far cry from Villa de Lis, but it had a certain artistic charm. Seraphina found the apartment and knocked her heart pounding a strange rhythm against her ribs. The door opened to reveal a young woman, perhaps a few years younger than Seraphina. Isabella Rossi was beautiful, with striking dark eyes and a cascade of unruly black curls. She was holding a baby, a tiny infant nestled against her chest. Leo. He was swaddled in a simple cotton blanket, his little face serene in sleep. For a moment, Seraphina simply stared the sight of the child, a visceral confirmation of Damian's betrayal. Isabella looked surprised, then wary. "Can I help you, Miss Rossi?" Seraphina began, her voice even. "My name is Seraphina Thorne. I believe you know my husband Damian." Isabella's eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning horror, as she registered Seraphina's visible pregnancy. The color drained from her face. She clutched Leo tighter. "Husband," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, Damian isn't," he said. He said what Miss Rossi Seraphina pressed not unkindly but firmly. That he was unhappily married, trapped in a loveless business arrangement. That he'd leave her soon. Isabella stumbled back, tears instantly springing to her eyes. He told me his wife didn't understand him, that they lived separate lives. He never said she was." Her gaze dropped to Seraphina's swollen belly. Pregnant. In that moment, Seraphina saw not a scheming seductress, but another victim. A woman duped by the same man, caught in the same web of lies, albeit from a different angle. Her anger towards Isabella softened, replaced by a shared, bitter understanding. "He told me he was on a business trip to Hong Kong the night Leo was born," Seraphina stated quietly. Isabella shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, he was here. He rushed here when I went into labor. He named our son." She looked utterly devastated, her world crumbling around her. "Oh my God." "He lied to both of us." "Yes," Seraphina said, the single word heavy with shared pain. "He did." She looked at Leo, this innocent child born into a maelstrom of deceit, her daughter Lily, and this boy Leo, half-siblings, their lives already irrevocably intertwined by their father's treachery. "He has a daughter too, Miss Rosie. Her gender was revealed the same day your son was born." Isabella let out a choked sob, sinking onto a nearby stool, Leo still cradled protectively. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I would never. If I had known." Seraphina believed her. There was no artifice in Isabella's raw grief. "I believe you," Seraphina said. "We have both been egregiously deceived, Miss Rosie. The question now is, what do we do about it?" The confrontation with Damian was set for 2 nights later at Oriole. Seraphina had meticulously planned it. She'd instructed the restaurant to set the private room for 3. She'd also arranged for her lawyer, the formidable Evelyn Hayes, known in elite circles as the Shark, to be discreetly present in an adjacent suite. Damian arrived at Oriole, expecting a quiet anniversary dinner, perhaps a chance to further smooth over any lingering doubts Seraphina might have about his Hong Kong ordeal. He was greeted by Seraphina looking regal and composed in a deep sapphire gown. She led him to their private dining room. He stopped short at the threshold. Isabella Rossi was already seated at the table, her expression a mixture of fear, anger, and sorrow. She too was dressed with a quiet dignity. Damian's face went from surprised to thunderstruck, then to a ghastly pale. He looked from Isabella to Seraphina, the realization dawning in his eyes that his carefully constructed separate worlds had not just collided. They had spectacularly imploded. "Seraphina. Isabella. What is this?" He stammered, his usual suave demeanor deserting him entirely. "This, Damian," Seraphina said, her voice like chips of ice, "is called truth, something you seem to have a rather tenuous relationship with." She gestured to the empty chair. "Please join us. We have so much to discuss, about Lily, and about Leo." The name Leo hung in the air. Damian visibly flinched. "I don't understand," he began, but Seraphina cut him off. "Oh, I think you do," she said, her eyes boring into his. "You understand perfectly. You understand about Evergreen Memorial Hospital. You understand about the typhoon in Hong Kong that never quite materialized. You understand about missing our daughter's gender reveal because you were attending the birth of your son." Each word was a precisely aimed dart. Damian sank into the chair, his face ashen. He looked at Isabella, whose tear-filled eyes accused him silently, then back at Seraphina, whose gaze was devoid of any warmth he'd once known. "Seraphina, I can explain." "Can you?" Seraphina challenged. "Can you explain why you felt entitled to destroy 2 women's lives to bring 2 children into the world under a cloud of such profound deceit? Can you explain the sheer arrogance, the utter contempt you've shown for everyone but yourself? The dinner that followed was not a meal, but an autopsy of a marriage and the dissection of a double life." Isabella, emboldened by Seraphina's strength and her own righteous anger, recounted Damian's lies to her. The non-existent, unhappy marriage, the promises of a future. Seraphina, calm and methodical, laid out the evidence of his deceptions, from the faked business trip to the secret birth. Damian Thorne, the titan of industry, The master manipulator was rendered speechless. He attempted denials, then justifications, then desperate pleas for forgiveness, but they all sounded hollow, pathetic, even to his own ears. He saw not just the loss of his wife, but the crumbling of his entire world, his carefully curated image, his legacy, all threatened. The twist came not from Damian's predictable self-preservation, but from a quiet strength that had been forged in Isabella. "I don't want your money to keep me quiet, Damian," Isabella said, her voice trembling but firm, when he inevitably tried to suggest a generous settlement for her and Leo. "I want you to acknowledge your son, publicly, and I want you to be a father to him if you're even capable of that. Not a secret, not a mistake to be hidden away." Seraphina watched Damian's reaction. He looked cornered, horrified at the prospect of such a public scandal. It was clear his primary concern was still containment, not contrition. "And I," Seraphina stated, her voice resonating with finality. "Want a divorce, Damian? I've already spoken to Evelyn Hayes. She'll be in touch with your lawyers." She placed a copy of the investigator's report, along with a photograph of Leo Rossi's birth announcement, from a local paper that Julian, in a moment of either extreme oversight or perhaps subtle rebellion, had failed to completely suppress on the table. "This isn't negotiable." Damian looked at the evidence at the two women, whose lives he had irrevocably altered. The sheer scale of his recklessness, the depth of his betrayal, was laid bare under the glittering chandeliers of Oriel. He had missed a gender reveal, yes, but in doing so he had revealed his own monstrous duplicity. A new, unexpected twist emerged as Seraphina prepared to leave. "There's one more thing, Damian," she said, pausing at the door. "My investigator was thorough. He looked into your Hong Kong subsidiary crisis. It seems the only crisis was the one you manufactured. However, he did uncover some irregularities in your company's offshore accounts. Significant ones. Things that might interest the SEC, or perhaps even the IRS." Damian's head snapped up, a new kind of fear in his eyes, one that had nothing to do with infidelity, and everything to do with financial ruin and imprisonment. Seraphina hadn't just found a private investigator. She'd found one with forensic accounting capabilities. His affair wasn't the only secret life he was leading. His carefully constructed business empire, it seemed, also had its own hidden, potentially illegal foundations. "Consider it my parting gift," Seraphina said, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "For Lily, and for Leo." She swept out of the room, leaving Damian Thorne not just with two betrayed women and the undeniable existence of two new children, but with the sudden terrifying prospect that his entire empire, built on layers of secrets, was about to come crashing down. The fallout from his missed gender reveal was about to extend far beyond the confines of his personal life. The aftermath of the Oriel confrontation was swift and brutal for Damian Thorne. Seraphina, true to her word, filed for divorce the very next day. Evelyn Hayes, the shark, lived up to her reputation, initiating proceedings that aimed not just for a fair settlement for Seraphina and Lily, but also for full transparency regarding Damian's assets that were now under the uncomfortable scrutiny hinted at by Seraphina's investigator. The news of Damian's impending divorce and the rumors of a second child, Leo Rossi, began to leak to the society pages, then to the financial press. The carefully polished image of Damian Thorne, devoted husband and visionary businessman, shattered like fragile glass. His company's stock price took an immediate hit. Board members grew uneasy. The irregularities in the offshore accounts, once a whisper, became a serious internal investigation, spurred by anonymous tips that Seraphina's investigator may or may not have strategically disseminated. Damian found himself isolated. His attempts to reason with Seraphina were met with a wall of polite, lawyer-filtered silence. His desperate calls to Isabella, offering everything from marriage to a blank check, were met with a weary but firm refusal. Isabella, with newfound clarity, wanted something Damian was ill-equipped to provide: genuine remorse and responsible fatherhood, not damage control. She secured her own legal counsel, focusing on establishing paternity and fair child support for Leo, determined to build a stable life for her son, free from Damian's toxic influence, but not without his accountability. The birth of Lily Grace Thorne occurred 3 weeks later. Seraphina, surrounded by her parents and a fiercely protective Chloe, welcomed her daughter into the world. Damian was not present. He was by then entangled in legal battles on multiple fronts, his divorce paternity claims from Isabella, and a rapidly escalating investigation into his financial dealings. He sent extravagant flowers and a note filled with remorse to the hospital, but they were returned unopened. Seraphina focused all her energy on Lily and her own healing. Villa de Lis, once a symbol of her gilded cage, began to transform. She redecorated, purging Damian's presence, filling it with light art and the sounds of her baby daughter. She discovered a strength she hadn't known. She possessed a resilience forged in the fires of betrayal. She started a foundation for single mothers, using her considerable social influence for good, turning her pain into purpose. For Damian, the fall was precipitous. The SEC launched a formal investigation. Key investors pulled out. His carefully constructed empire built on a mixture of brilliance, ruthlessness, and it turned out significant financial impropriety began to crumble. He was forced to step down as CEO of Thorn Industries. The opulent lifestyle he'd taken for granted began to unravel. There was no redemption arc in sight, only the cold, hard consequences of his actions. He faced not just financial ruin, but the very real possibility of prison time. Isabella Rossi, in contrast, found a quiet strength. She moved to a new apartment, creating a warm, loving environment for Leo. She continued her art, her experiences infusing her work with a new depth and emotional honesty that began to attract critical acclaim. She allowed Damian supervised visitation with Leo, understanding the importance of a father in a child's life, but she kept him at a distance, protecting her son and herself from further emotional turmoil. She and Seraphina, once unwitting rivals, developed a cautious, respectful understanding. They were bound by their children, 2 innocent lives caught in the crossfire of Damian's deceit. They never became friends. The wounds were too deep for that, but they maintained a civil channel of communication for the sake of Lily and Leo. Years passed. Seraphina thrived. Lily grew into a bright, happy child, shielded from the worst of her father's scandal, but aware in the way children are of his absence and the reasons for it. Seraphina never remarried, pouring her love into her daughter and her philanthropic work. She proved to be a formidable businesswoman in her own right, taking control of her divorce settlement and investing wisely, securing a future for herself and Lily that was independent of the Thorn name. Damian eventually served time for financial fraud. He emerged a humbled, broken man, his fortune gone, his reputation irreparable. He tried sporadically to be a father to Lily and Leo, but the chasm created by his past actions was too vast to bridge meaningfully. He became a footnote in their lives, a cautionary tale. The final twist, if one could call it that, was quieter, more poignant. One sunny afternoon at a children's art fair, that Seraphina's foundation sponsored Lily Thorne, now 7 with her mother's grace and a spark of her father's ambition was painting at an easel. A little boy, Leo Rossi, also 7, with his mother's dark, intense eyes and a quiet, observant nature, approached her intrigued by her vibrant use of color. They didn't know they were half-siblings. Their mothers, watching from a distance, exchanged a brief, knowing glance. There was no grand reconciliation, no dramatic revelation planned for that day. Just 2 children brought into the world under a cloud of secrets, now finding a simple, innocent connection in a shared love for art. Perhaps in them, a new story could begin, one free from the shadows of their father's past. The legacy of Damian Thorne's missed gender reveal wasn't just one of shattered lives and broken trust, but also of unexpected resilience, the quiet strength of 2 mothers, and the innocent hope embodied by their children, painting a brighter future, one brushstroke at a time. And so Damian Thorne's empire of lies crumbled, all stemming from one missed gender reveal and a devastating secret. 2 innocent children, Lily and Leo, now navigate a world shaped by their father's choices, while their mothers, Seraphina and Isabella, have risen from the ashes of betrayal stronger and more resilient than ever. This story is a raw look at the consequences of deceit, the complexities of love, and the unexpected paths to healing. What did you think of Seraphina's strength? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like Damian's? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story gripped you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves a drama-filled tale, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next explosive story. We delve deep into the human heart, exposing its darkest secrets and celebrating its brightest triumphs. Thanks for watching.